As we see here, we often do live in turbulent cities. And it seems that stress is one of the main problems as well as loneliness. They are the main problems in today's world. And stress is the evil twin of fear. Fear and stress pretty much always go hand in hand. A brief note on stress. In the short term, stress is a survival tool when you put all your strength into fight or flight. This is useful. It's the reason why we've survived as humans. But if stress affects you in the long term and creates fear, it makes you ill. It destroys a part of the brain. That means old soldiers could no longer find their way around because their short-term memory doesn't work. And most importantly, it destroys the immune system. And then diseases occur everywhere. In my opinion, fear is more dangerous than you think. It's a serious illness. And the methods that the Buddha and subsequently other people developed 2,500 years ago reduces fear considerably. That means you get your remedies. Here in Japanese Buddhism, we have this center, hara, below the navel. That's the energy and joy center of human beings, not the mind, not even the heart. Rather, the center is here, and we've forgotten that. And when you rediscover that, you will gain renewed energy. You'll be able to recreate yourself. You can find completely new ways that you had not known and thought of before.
My name is
Jürgen Seggelke. I also have a Buddhist name, i.e. Yudo, Santetsu Yudo. And I spend a lot of time in Japan, but mainly here on the Canary Islands. We used to have a finca on Gran Canaria, but it got a bit too noisy, and that's why we discovered La Gomera. If you are struck by fate, if somebody dies, or you are abandoned, or you experience anxieties at work, or in a bad partnership, whatever life hits you with, and there is certainly no one to whom this doesn't happen and who is immune, then Buddhism helps you to see that, to recognize that, and to find the way. That is to say, the Four Noble Truths state relatively simply, this is suffering, and the Buddha summarizes 12 different forms of suffering. For one, illness, old age, death. Then it is mainly psychological, sorrow, misery, grief, despair. You don't know what to do anymore. Then a very important issue in the modern age. You don't get what you want, materialism. And then the Buddha says, the origins of suffering, where does it come from? And then he provides some great pointers when he says, greed, hatred, and ignorance are the main causes, the main reasons for suffering. So, for example, you have a quarrel with somebody, and you hate them. They harm you, they torment you, for example in war, and you hate them. And whom do you harm? The one who torments you? Yourself. That is great wisdom. Jochen, let's start with the terrace.
Dieses Tal hier,
This valley here, Benchihigoa, is undergoing a transformation, and I would like to open a small Zen center here. I feel that with a new way of life, including a global coexistence, we can also create a new way of life here. This is where the expansion of Western civilization got started. Unfortunately, it has to be said that a great deal of injustice was committed in America, South America, with the Bible in hand, not least by the Spaniards, so that they actually pretty much undermined their own spirit in America. They traveled there as Christians and as curious people. They wanted to go to India and actually forgot their ethics, at least in part. This means it's a typical development that we have in Europe. We're pretty much at the end of the road with our culture and our wisdom, the way things have been going. It's a bit too limited and a bit too dogmatic. And I believe that Buddhism can give us entirely new ideas. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha recognized with incredible clarity how people govern themselves, how they govern their suffering, and, above all, how they interact with each other. Social intelligence is one of the crucial characteristics of Buddhism. And we, in the Occident, have lost that somewhat. We've become egoists and individualists. Humans are actually social beings, rather than individualists or egoists. We're harming ourselves with it, and our spirit will dry up with it. I'm a computer engineer. I have 2 degrees, in computer science and in industrial engineering. And then I developed systems, computer systems, back in the pioneering era. Among other things, I worked at the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, developing their system. And that's when I first came across artificial intelligence and tried to figure out the difference between computer intelligence and human intelligence. I worked mainly with interfaces, and in the process, I got more and more involved in the questions of Buddhism. I have to add one important thing. I had a job that was actually too difficult for me, and I was afraid of failure. I couldn't sleep and so on, the usual stuff. You're nervous. During the day, you try to cope to some extent. At night, you can't sleep. And then I discovered an American book that describes how to meditate. It's called Zazen meditation. I started practicing it in the mornings and evenings. It doesn't have to be long. It's a certain sitting position, actually quite simple. It clears your head and you regain a sense of confidence in yourself. And the most important thing at that time was that I found good people for the team. I was also open to others. And then we put together a small team and were able to develop really good systems. For several years, they were the most important systems for all federal authorities. Take a break and tell yourself. Now you have to look inside yourself, old friend, regardless of outside successes and outside failures. What is going on with you? So that's what awareness is. So, if we say that life is a process, then something always comes up. It lasts for a while, and then it goes away. And as to suffering, the unpleasant things, what do you want? You want them to go away quickly. But you only learn that if you observe yourself carefully. And if you take action, when you experience suffering now, how do you get rid of it? The other way around is when you have inner calm, stability, and you decide that they should last a little longer. In order to control this, we're coming to the important points, i.e. the positive factors, the 7 factors of awareness awakening through which you attain this calm. And you can subdivide them. First of all, a stability within yourself, because that is the prerequisite for getting along with others, for having a certain calmness, stability, balance within yourself. Also, trust in yourself. That's what Buddhism teaches you. And not only on the outside, whether you hit the target or not, but how your inner process is. Only then do the waves of happiness come. Otherwise, they don't come. As to the arrows, there's the term chi, describing a flowing energy. It's not about states, not about statics, and not about details. Neither is it about cutting things apart and putting them together. Rather, they believe it's about life being a flowing movement, and I agree with this to a great extent. And it seems to me that the Japanese have developed this flowing energy in an ingenious way. They converted the bow, which was a weapon, and linked it with spirituality, especially with Buddhism. And then this flowing energy is slowly built up, built up, built up, and then you reach the climax, where the full tension has been reached, and then twang. This point, where all that energy is released, seems to me to be of crucial importance. And if I develop an awareness of that, then this is the point where I have full clarity, twang. And what does that mean? You have mastered the technique of the individual steps to such an extent that you can almost do them automatically. And this maxim, "it has shot," has moved me all my life. Later at university and in my professional life, I wanted to learn things so thoroughly that the results almost came about of their own accord. Of course, they don't come about entirely of their own accord, but almost. That was the first important step that made me connect with archery. And the next one was, for me, archery more or less opened up Zen Buddhism for me. To put it briefly, Zen Buddhism has a saying, "Awakening is carrying firewood and drawing water." This means it's important to meditate, but real life. Because what do you carry firewood for? When it's cold and you can drink tea together, and when you want to cook food. I.e., it's an activity, it's something you do because it brings people together. That's called Mahayana Buddhism. So it's not just about sitting alone in the corner and meditating, that too, but also something that is shared with others. Jürgen, what are you currently writing? I'm writing the third volume of a trilogy of Buddhism, which is called Great Moments of Buddhism. For this, I've thought of three geniuses who worked out characteristic elements of Buddhism. The first, of course, is Gautama Buddha himself. The second is a great Indian master called Nagarjuna, and the third is a Zen master called Dogen. I've already finished 2 of the books, and they've also been published. I'm now working on the third. The third one is about the most important questions of awakening, nirvana, the 12 stages of human development, and that's what I'm working on now. I can work really well here. It might sound a bit strange, but where I'm sitting right now, this used to be a stable. In the village down there, where almost 100 people lived, there was a lot of trouble, as there always is with people. But I dare say the stable was peaceful, because that's where the peaceful animals were. And we started here exactly 2 years ago. The first works were going on here, and the first part of the terrace was just finished. Since then, we've done a lot. And it may sound strange coming from a computer engineer, but I have the feeling that there is a very good energy here, and that could be related to the animals that used to live here. And it occurred to me that in Christianity we also have a stable. It is usually explained by theologians that this is because of poverty and because they couldn't find a place to stay. But maybe the stable in Bethlehem at that time, was a particularly good environment, especially for new teachings that start almost from scratch, and where it's not about the humans, but about the animals. And one last thing, it was quite cold in winter, and when you're in the stable with animals, it's warmer. This is why I can work so well here. There is a term called interaction in the ancient Pali and Sanskrit languages. And up to now, it has only ever been translated as dependence, dependent emergence. But that does not apply to the interaction between nature and humans. Humans, in particular, are not isolated, A and B. Rather, there is an essential relationship between them. Inter means it goes back and forth. And it is an action. And ecology, which I also studied, is always in interaction, which is something that has been neglected so far. That's part of our problems with environmental protection. Today, we also know that the brain, the neural network, also fundamentally operates with interactions. So you can say that wherever nature is particularly efficient, it operates in interaction, back and forth. Not just in one direction, but rather it interacts. Now the Buddha teaches and says how I can achieve self-fulfillment in this nature that is in reciprocal interaction. How I can build in self-governance, so to speak, in order to find my way in this diversity of life. The Buddha says, seek the path of your truth and then walk it. When you travel around the world and say you're from Berlin, all the young people say, "That's where I want to go," or "I've been there." That means Berlin is probably one of the most vibrant, most creative, but also most stressful cities at the moment. So to me, an interaction between Berlin on the one hand and Gomera, with its nature and peace and intensity on the other, seems to be a pretty ideal life choice. I can hardly imagine a better one.